Survivor's ready. Go!
Travis spoken.
Boston Rob and Amber are gonna do it.
This is a business trip, as I like to say.
You Brad Culpepper.
I'm tired of you and the fucking chicken.
You can call me the puppet master. They can be my little puppets.
It's not like you make me deal with the devil here.
You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
We got enough rocks here, too. We could build a pretty decent shelter just using rocks.
I'm supposed to talk loud,
Direct from Hobart, it's time for the only Survivor podcast in Australia dedicated to Survivor. Bring you today's interviews, episodes, and opinions from the greatest reality show on the planet. It's Survivor Oz, and here's your host.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Survivor Oz, and we are here for our weekly Oz Cup, and we're also here for our weekly Ozlet show. And if things didn't work out according to plan, we're also here for our guest recap of the week. And we grew tired of bringing on Survivor contestants. We've heard all the stories as many times as we can. So we're here to bring you the best recapper of the season, the one and only Anthony Rossi. You are here as our guest, past contestant, fill-in for the week. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. I didn't think I was that special, but I'll take it.
You're all we have. Let's look at it on the bright side.
Wow.
Here. It was you or Cable.
All right. You started off strong.
Yeah, it was you or Cable, so we made the right choice here. Or I should say it was you or Noah or Cable. So we definitely made the right choice here. Hi, Noah. And hi, Cable, who we found out this past week doesn't actually listen to our podcast, but I'm sure he'll listen to this one and give us some feedback. Let's jump into this here. Second last episode of the season, and I think both of us have talked out the entire season so far, but this episode here, following up on what we saw last week, where the vote against Jason threw Ty off, as if anybody should be surprised when people decide they don't want to keep Jason around. Apparently Ty was shocked at this. Ty was left out of the plan. He probably should have seen it coming. I don't know. Rossi, the opening scene of this episode, really just the fallout from Ty being left out of the group, which I guess we're kind of seeing this every single week now. There's somebody who's being left out of the plans and somebody who's upset about it. So how do you feel about Ty's reaction to all this?
Standard. We as viewers are used to seeing how Ty reacts to things that don't go how he expected. But it was just such an awkward scene. I thought that was so uncomfortable with Joe trying to, grab his shoulder, and it was just so weird. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how to feel about it, but not surprised to see Ty fumbling around, not knowing what to do, him being the only person to vote for Michelle, all that kind of stuff. It was typical Ty. Hashtag typical Ty.
Yeah, we got a new hashtag here. I want to talk about Ty for a second because I think we've all seen these votes where somebody is left out of the plan, and usually it's preceded by the episode beforehand. I guess the rest of the people making a conscious effort to keep that person out of the plan and saying, we need to tell them this is what it's going to be. And maybe my memory's not serving me right, but I don't feel like last week's episode had a lot revolving around, let's make sure Ty doesn't know what's going down here. This, to me, it almost felt like embarrassing on Ty's part, as if there were probably scenes that maybe we didn't see where everybody was saying directly to Ty's face, Ty, we are going to be voting out Jason. He's like, all right, let's vote out Michelle, and he's just ignoring it. Do you think that Ty's in any way in tune with what anybody else is doing in this game?
Ty isn't. He's there when he's in the conversations, but then I think he forgets that things happen after he's out of the conversation. Mm-hmm. So I think, he'll talk to Aubrey, and then the plan's set when he talks to Aubrey, but then Aubrey has every right to talk to Sydney, Michelle, Jason, even Liz from, anyone. She has the right to talk to anyone and stuff. And so it's very obvious when things don't go his way that he forgets that. He just doesn't check in or bother to continue on, and so he does the big push, aggressive single push, and then that's all he does.
It's especially weird because I feel like Ty, he was the one who was pushing for Michelle last week, and we didn't see anybody on board with that. And you're saying, like, when things don't go his way and everything, and that's kind of what we've seen this entire season. It's strange that he did break off from that alliance with Jason and Scott, because there seems to still be a lot of Jason Scott in him. Like we saw when things didn't go Jason Scott's way, they kind of threw a hissy fit. And the fact that he blamed Aubrey for this, again, all of last week's Tribal Council was about the fact that Ty would only single out one or two people in these alliances. He's like, well, I need to talk to Sydney one-on-one. And he doesn't even seem aware that there's a larger alliance at work here. I mean, it feels to me like everything Ty does in this game. A couple of weeks ago, we were thinking maybe Ty can win this. And it feels like every scene we have now, he's just either shooting himself in the foot where he's showing that he's not really playing the game that well at all, or that he's just rubbing people the wrong way. I mean, Michelle obviously reacted very strongly to this, as she probably should have. I mean, she was kind of left out in the previous week, and she didn't really throw the hissy fit that he did. But how do you feel about Ty and the chances he would have of getting any jury votes at this point?
I don't know. Honestly, it's hard to tell just because we haven't gotten a real sense. I feel like we haven't gotten a lot of sense of the jury, personally. I think a lot of people say that we have, but I don't think we have. People assume that Jason and Scott are going to vote the same way, but we don't know that. We assume that Debbie and Neil are going to vote the same way, but we don't know that. So it's really up in the air. I think Ty, if anything, is the one person we have a sense of if he's going to receive votes or not, just because he's been getting the most reaction from Scott and the company on the jury. But I don't see it going well for him. Just because he's been all over the place in the game, I don't see it translating well to the jury.
Yeah, I'll have more to say about Ty later on when we get closer to the end of the episode, because in a way I almost want to see him make it to the end. And it's not that I dislike Ty as a character. I find that the more he messes up in this game, the more I love watching him in this game. But I guess the biggest hit for him was the whole Aubrey thing, which I don't know when him and Aubrey became this super tight alliance. There was maybe one scene early on, and I have some opinions on how Ty makes his decisions or how he forms his alliances. But do you remember, I'll just put it right out there, I'm in a bit of a daze the last couple of weeks because we have as we've been saying on the show, my wife and I have a new baby, so I'm going to be saying throughout this episode, I don't remember, was this up in last week, but I'll just say it now. I don't really remember a scene where it's set up Ty and Aubrey as this really tight unit where he could be this upset that she didn't go with him. Did I miss something early in the season, or have I already forgotten it through a couple of sleepless nights?
I don't think you've forgotten it, because I don't think we've gotten it clearly articulated in the scenes, but I do think it's that Ty thinks that she's probably the most down to earth or something. I don't know, more most humble or something. I feel like just a subconscious Ty thought just seeps into his mind, and then therefore Aubrey's the best.
That sums up Ty. I know I wrote in my power rankings, you mentioned it before we started recording here. I wrote my power rankings this past week. Ty basically just moves from one person to the next, and as soon as he has one moment with that person, as soon as they have a nice conversation, as soon as they hug it out, whatever it is, that's his new best friend, and then that's all it is. It's that one moment, and then he'll blow up at somebody. We saw the exact same thing last week with Jason, where he was totally against Jason, and Jason was totally against him, and then he had one nice conversation with Jason, and suddenly he's like, I want to keep Jason around and turn on the rest of my allies. It's just, he's the most... It feels weird to say this when you have players in the past like Sugar to compare him to, but I feel like Ty is probably the most emotionally driven player we have ever seen. Not the most emotionally, outwardly emotional player. That would be somebody like Sugar, and there's definitely somebody like Dawn, people who are very emotional, but they still, I think, made game moves on their own. I feel like every move Ty makes is just based on who gives him a warm and fuzzy feeling every week. Am I the only one who thinks that?
No, you're definitely not alone in that thought, but Ty is so endearing that it kind of works for him as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Not as a game, but just as an individual. So it doesn't seem to rub anyone, people the wrong way at all. Aubrey's not reacting negatively to, she may not know, but, his newfound relationship with Michelle. and stuff. Like, I feel like it works for him, and he's not going to get negative feedback from Aubrey for talking to Michelle or something like that, because that's who he is.
If people caught on to this earlier in the game, can you imagine the power that somebody could have just to manipulate Ty, just the drop of a hat? Just any time you want to get him to do something, just say something nice, give him a hug, and suddenly he's your puppet. Like, it would be brilliant to see. If Ty does come back, you know that there are going to be people who are going to use this against him. I would love to see that. Let's move on to the reward challenge. Now, normally I don't talk about reward challenges on the show. Usually I barely talk about the immunity challenges. I've even gone on record and said that sometimes I skip the challenges just because it's late at night by the time I watch the episode and I got to get through it. This reward challenge, I thought, did something really different, and it was the idea that you can kind of expire and have to wait on somebody else. And the fact that this came down to the guy who was going the slowest being the only person who could make a move left in the game, like, I absolutely love that. I think this is something that they should try again. It's a way the players have to rethink how they do challenges. So what did you think about the reward challenge this week?
I enjoyed the challenge. I thought it was pretty... I mean, it's a generic challenge, but I thought it was pretty interesting. Especially because we're used to not seeing flat targets. We're usually, like, getting vertical targets. It's just nice to have a horizontal target. Mm-hmm. That's just a weird thing that I had. And I like the idea, but I wish they told us. Because I didn't know until Jeff said, "Oh, Aubrey's out." I'm like, what? Why is she out? She can't... Normally she picks up the bags and keeps going. It was just weird. I like the idea, but I feel like it worked this time because Joe ended up winning. Mm-hmm. But that would have been so awkward if they had to reset the challenge. I wanted them to show it to us that they had to reset, but also, like, wasting time resetting a challenge, essentially.
Yeah, I guess they didn't really explain it that well at the beginning, but in a way I feel like that's what made it more interesting to me, because suddenly there's this thing where it's like, okay, well, you have to wait now, and we have only Joe left. And I don't think anybody expected Joe to nail the last two exactly as he did, and the fact that Joe was winning a challenge, the guy who's usually, at least in the last couple of weeks, I think he was strong when they were a team, but in the individual portion of the game hasn't really been that strong. He's volunteered to sit out challenges in the last couple of weeks, and then for him to win this was fantastic. Also, they brought back the, pick somebody to go with you, which really doesn't happen that much anymore. Again, I got into a little bit of discussion last week when we had Scout on it. The fact that they were seeing some things happen in these reward challenges are going against an article I wrote like 2 weeks ago on the site saying that we should just do away with reward challenges. This, again, I think it's a one-time incident. And honestly, I think we've seen so many of these, let's pair you guys up into two teams and that's your reward, that it was a welcome surprise now that we do have this, okay, you can pick who's going on this with you. So the one thing I wanted to bring up was if we go back a couple of seasons, I think it was in San Juan del Sur, where, like previous seasons then, you would always pick who's going with you on these challenges, and it kind of worked against the show. Like, people have mentioned in the past how in Worlds Apart, the auction was broken and stuff like that, and I feel like San Juan del Sur was the season where picking your reward companions, it kind of broke the premise in Survivor, because it just became too strategic, and you had people saying, I'm going to give up mine, I'm going to give up mine. Now that they're bringing this back, do you think this is something that could ever return again, or would we fall into a San Juan del Sur mess? Or is it something that's better to just be dropped once or twice a season? Hey, you can pick who goes with you.
Are you talking about, like, how people go, who goes on reward, essentially, like, instead of teams picking?
Yeah, exactly. You win the reward. Now, who do you want to bring along with you? Which one or two people?
I think it's good to have a mix in the season. Like, have teams and have pick'ems. Like, we had the famous thing with Kat picking the wrong people, and then Brenda picking the right people, but also then picking the wrong people kind of things. But also, I think the team dynamic's really interesting, too, because who you end up with, like, thinking back, oh my God, this is embarrassing, but I'm blanking on the name the one before San Juan del Sur.
I have to number the seasons to figure this out. That would be Cagayan, First Brains, Brawn Beauty, wouldn't it?
Yes,
be?
yes, sorry.
There we go.
That one.
We both blanked. We're hosting your recap for the week, and we both forgot when the first Brains Brawn Beauty was.
But that season they had that one of the rewards where like it was the Minority Alliance and then Jeffra, who may actually switch, like who is going to flip at that point. So I thought that was interesting to have teams like. So I wouldn't want just one way. I'd want it mixed. Like I definitely don't want all teams because that could get boring. But also I don't want the same people to go on the same rewards, because if Aubrey wins 3 rewards, then Sydney's going on every reward, I feel like, or something like that may happen.
Do you think that the way that it was chose this week, I mean, I don't think Joe really had any strategy. He was just picking Aubrey, which is weird to me because, again, sometimes it's what you don't see on the show that's more interesting. And what we haven't really seen, we hear a lot of people talking about Joe and Aubrey being unbreakable, and I feel like every single week we're seeing Joe and Aubrey butting heads and not getting along and not even voting together. But this, I guess, kind of showed that really they are joined at the hip, or this is his number one ally. Then to bring Sydney along, like, do you think this is a mistake to leave Michelle back there with Ty, or from their perspective was this, well, these two clearly don't get along, it's a safe bet?
I definitely thought it was a mistake to bring Sydney, yes. Just because there was issues with the last tribal council with Michelle going, and even though they did vote to save her, they didn't actually really... Sydney and Joe weren't actually there helping her. It was really Sydney who did a lot of the work. I mean, herself too. Michelle helped herself. But, like, Sydney was the main person. So I feel like it was more so that they didn't, reassure her that she's in the alliance as opposed to leaving her back with Ty. I think that was not the issue. Because honestly, like, no one had figured out that Ty will hug anyone to get back with them. So, like, they obviously have not cracked the code, but, like, I think it's more of an issue that they didn't reassure her about her place in the group, which then resulted in them kind of forming this bond.
Well, see, and I want to get your opinion on this because I know you're the Michelle fan that at least we have involved in this show, or one of the Michelle fans, and I'm kind of not the Michelle fan, but to me, the fact that she was left out of this, I think shows more how much she really isn't even part of the game. And if you have an argument, definitely make it. You know, we'll get both sides said here, but they're really, I mean, okay, you could look at it and say, yeah, you don't want to leave Sydney back at camp. Sydney has had her explosive moments. You don't want to risk that Sydney could pull something off because she's a smart player. Maybe that's why Aubrey decided to keep her close, but then you're clearly showing Michelle's on the outside. It was the fact that we didn't have any confessionals or any moments of even hesitation from Aubrey and Sydney where they're like, yeah, well, we got to be careful. We don't want Michelle to take this the wrong way. I think clearly they don't even care, and that from what they're putting out there, they feel like Michelle knows she's not even really part of this group. And it's very similar to, I think, the way that it was with Alicia, where, yeah, Sydney was good friends with her and Sydney was pretending she was working with her, but when it came down to the final vote, when Jeff said, is there any point to going to tribal council, even Sydney's like, no, we all know who's going home. And I almost wonder if that's where Michelle's at right now, too, because it doesn't feel like they would make a decision like this. These aren't the type of people who would just say, well, let's keep her over there with Ty, even if they did figure, well, they're not going to get along. There's still a risk one of them can pull something off or even be upset. So do you think that Michelle is in this game any more than I'm giving her credit for?
She's more in the game than you give her credit for.
Based
I don't
off
think
this?
Yeah, because I don't think it's fair to say that Michelle's not in the game if she wasn't picked for a reward. Does that mean Ty's not in the game because he wasn't picked for a reward?
Well, she was also left out of entire votes in, like, the past couple weeks, too.
Yeah, but, like, I don't...
And even Ty was questioning whether she was even a member of this alliance, which we'll get to that
but you're
in a
also
second.
Questioning Ty. You're using Ty as a good judgment like a good tool to judge Michelle.
True, but I'm building a case for how many different people, because I actually do think there's some validity to the whole Ty thing, because Ty didn't feel at all worried about saying to Michelle, you know, I was in this alliance before you were. And that's the next thing I guess we'll kind of get to after the whole, or maybe before we get to Joe and the reward challenge. We're on the topic now, let's just cover it. when Ty said that to her, Michelle had a completely different reaction. She goes, "No, I was in this alliance before you were." And it's interesting because from whose perspective is that true? Was it true that Ty came into this alliance, or Michelle might have been in the group but Ty wasn't aware of it? There's so many different things going on, but clearly these two people were never even informed of how the other person was involved. So I think that would even show that from at least what Aubrey and Sydney are telling Ty, they're not telling Ty Michelle has anything to do with this group. And then on Michelle's side, she's saying, well, I was in this alliance first, but the show has over and over again told us Michelle has not had a solid ally in the game. So I still feel like if you add everything up from every week, Michelle is completely on the outside.
Well, I think Michelle's willing to sacrifice who she needs to, because Michelle's solid allies were Nick and Julia. And Nick had to go, and Miss Julia had to go. And she was willing to do that. And I think she was willing to get rid of her solid allies to keep herself in the alliance. Because if she stayed with Julia and Nick, she'd be going soon, and she knows that.
Well, yeah, but by getting rid of them, she doesn't have the votes to turn anything in her favor, which is why they were able to leave her out of past votes, which is why we're in this whole situation where Aubrey, Sydney, and Joe...
What past vote was she out of?
Sorry, what was that?
What vote was she out of?
Which vote was she out of? This is where the baby brain's kicking in.
Because I'm struggling to remember what vote she was out of. Because I feel like there was one that I remember her being like, what? And then
I'll have to go back
I think
over.
There was only one.
To be continued. I'll review it as you're...
Okay, you gotta get your facts straight if you're gonna come at...
Well, you gotta give a decent argument. How about that? Let's look it over here. Where do you find these things?
She voted out Julia.
She voted for Ty the week that Scott was gone.
So that was the one vote.
So there we go. She voted for Ty when Scott was voted out. And the thing is, Michelle was not even believed to be in that alliance, that whole Scott, Julia, whatever thing was going on.
No, she was with Debbie and... Well, not Debbie. Debbie was out at that point. But she was with Aubrey, Michelle...
But let's look at this. In that vote, again, just further solidifying my point here, in that vote... the only people who voted for Ty were her and Julia. And then she voted Julia out next week. So the only person who was voting with her, she voted out. I just feel like if you, and anybody who's listening to this episode, reply with your comments. You're probably going to reply after the finale airs, because this will most likely be going up only a day or two before. But which side are you on? Does Michelle have any clue what's going on in the game? Is Michelle included in anybody's plans? You're going to know by the time you're hearing this probably, but I think it's still open for debate.
Her game has just been shifting. She's been with these different groups. So she was with the beauty group, then she gradually shifted away from that toward Aubrey and Sydney, because at one point Aubrey was on the outs, and then she kind of formed this group, and then Michelle was a part of this group. I think you call that a floater. Wells, who was at the walking trips? Michelle's picked up on so much that you don't give credit to.
Well, I mean, I think what you just described is what you could call a floater, and I think the only common factor in these different groups is that she was never really at the top of any of these alliances. In fact, you could argue she was almost at the bottom of any of these alliances.
But do you need to be at the one making every... Like, I don't...
Well, I don't think that we've seen...
the pivotal figure of the alliance, because then that draws targets to you.
No, but I don't
Sydney
think we've
and Aubrey
seen...
are going to go at it next episode.
Have we seen any moments... We're going into the finale, and I don't think we've ever had a winner. And this season, I've been saying on every single one of the recaps, there is no more winner's edit. They are rewriting a winner's edit here the same way they rewrote one with Tony and with Natalie. I mean, this is what they were doing. But have we ever gone into a finale where somebody had no power and was not even a significant character? I mean, the closest you could really say would be somebody like Fabio. Fabio was always left out. Fabio really didn't have a clue what was going on in the game. But Fabio, I think, was still a major character. I don't see where there has been any storyline built for her to potentially win this thing.
But I see her as the player that has literally been with different people, worked with everyone. And yes, she may not be the one saying, well, we're going to do this because that's what I say, and then that's what happens. She's not that type of aggressive, like, voter, like, kind of strategist, like Aubrey or something like that. but she's not just sitting in the back. She's there. She's watching and then reacting, and I think that's really important in this game.
I agree she's watching and reacting. I just think that she's waited too long to do the reacting. I actually will say I find her a lot more entertaining the last couple weeks now that they're showing her. It's really no judgment on Michelle. I had the same feelings on Julia. I thought Julia was the most useless character we had out there until they started showing her. But I think no matter what season you're in, you're going to have certain people where there's just not time to develop them until you have to. And I feel like those are the players who are never going to win. This is like a Brett in Samoa. You know, it's you have to have an underdog in the finale, and there has to be some question that the major alliance could be overturned. And Michelle's that person, and they've done a good job in building her the last 2 weeks to cast some doubt, you know, that Aubrey and Sydney may not win this game or may not go to the end. But I feel like there's just no possibility that you could turn around from this and make her a legitimate winner at this point.
Well, you can't say that they're getting rid of winners edits and use the edit as an example of why Michelle won't win.
Well, I'm saying winners edits, but there's one consistent in Survivor, and that's if you have a character who you don't even see until the third last episode, and then suddenly in the third last episode, in the second last episode, they're just this powerhouse. They're all over the screen. That's because you need to have a new person to set up as the underdog. I don't think we've ever been failed on that. I don't know if we've ever seen an underdog emerge only 3 episodes left in the season and go on to win the whole thing. Just say it. You think I'm wrong.
I just think it's wrong to say that the edit's been changing. Like, they're using different editing styles and then use the edit as the reason Michelle won't win.
Well, I'm not saying that okay, yeah, you're right on that. To say based on past, we do have to look at past seasons, but this isn't just about the edit. It's about what can an audience even accept? Can an audience accept a character that most people probably forgot the name of until the third last episode, and she ends up winning the season? I mean, you look at how people respond to characters like Natalie or Sophie, or even Fabio, you know, who was, again, a more major character but non-existent player. And the fans have never responded well to that in the past. It's not about can you rewrite the edit. It's that in rewriting this edit of a winner, let's say Michelle is, are they doing it in a way where the audience will accept it? And I think the audience could accept, as bizarre as it would be, if Ty wins this game, the audience will accept it because it was an entertaining season. And sometimes in the most bizarre seasons, a bizarre winner makes sense. The same thing I'd say with Aubrey. I think I think I wrote in my power rankings every single week that there are just as many arguments to make for that Aubrey could not win this game as the ones that you could make that Aubrey can win this game. But that's what makes it different. I just don't see any audience accepting this character that they're going to introduce to you in episode 12 going on to win the whole thing against 3 major players from the merge on.
Okay, but just pulling up some stats here.
See, this is why I should have gotten Nowhere Cable, because you're the stat guy. You can pull them out of a hat.
Pulling up stats, Michelle currently has the 3rd most confessionals of the season. Well, so I don't think it's unbelievable to say people are going to forget her.
Tell me one of her confessionals. See, this is the other thing. And again, another article I plan on writing at some point is how confessionals are meaningless, because the confessionals are only half of it. If you're basing anything on confessionals, well, that's just the stuff that's not even happening on the show. That's somebody narrating thoughts and everything like that. 3rd most confessionals, but what major scenes has she been involved in?
Well, I'm using the confessional argument against your people are not going to warrant her as a winner from the fans' perspective if they're going to forget her. But
just out of curiosity, who are the other... Well, I'm going to guess the top 2 are probably Aubrey and Ty.
Yes. Okay. Ty has 65, Aubrey has 54, Michelle has 45.
Okay, so who's next after Michelle?
In total?
Yeah.
Jason with 44.
Okay, and then?
Scott with 36.
And then?
Sydney with 32.
Okay. I think that still works in my favor, because I don't think anybody out there is going to say that Michelle is a bigger character than Sydney, and yet Michelle has, 12 more confessionals, 13 more confessionals than Sydney does? Sydney doesn't even need confessionals. If you end a season and you say this winner had 32 confessionals, you're like, wow, that's like, that's like Natalie or Sandra levels of confessionals. But the fact is, Sydney is one of the major characters of the season, and she didn't need the confessionals to do it. Agree to disagree.
I agree with you in that aspect, but I don't have anything else to say because I also think that I have a valid point as well. So,
well, we'll let the fans decide. Give us your thoughts on it.
No one's going to comment, Colin. Let it go.
They are going to comment because Michelle's not going to win the game, and afterwards they're all going to reply to this and be like, "I agree with Colin," just so they look smarter. But we'll move on.
She's going to win this game, so.
This is why you were a better choice to have on than a past survivor contestant or Noah or Cable. We could have a debate on here. Let's talk about... This is what I've wanted to talk about the whole week here. Let's talk about Joe in his reward challenge. Now, I don't know if I misunderstood this here, or did he say that he doesn't eat meat, period, or he just rarely eats meat? Do you remember that? Is there a stat on that?
No, he did not supply me with any meat facts over the years. I can pull up meat facts if you'd like.
Okay, I don't know if he ever was established as a vegetarian at any point. I thought at first I heard him say that he doesn't eat a lot of beef, and then later on when he was explaining to everybody else, I thought I heard him say, I don't eat meat. But either way, I didn't know this was a thing that you could go that long without eating something, and obviously if you gorge on anything, it's going to make you sick, but maybe this is like a 71-year-old thing, I don't know. It was very clear, and I have made fun of everybody all season when people are trying to figure out who these medevacs are going to be, and all season people have been, it's going to be Joe because of this, it's going to be Joe because of this, and I've been laughing at everybody all season saying, you're only saying that because the guy's 70-something years old. It turns out to be true, and the moment that Joe was mentioning about how I don't eat a lot of this and I had a lot of beef, I knew he was done. And I was wishing that I hadn't said the whole time, oh, Joe's not going to be the medevac. But, Rossi, do you want to read out a little bit of what you just found here?
Okay. You asked for meat facts? Well, you didn't ask. I just gave it to you. But upscale steakhouses use dry-aged beef where the beef is hung on a rack to dry for several weeks. The process evaporates moisture in the muscles and promotes enzymatic breakdown of connective tissue, which together yields a flavorful meat.
There we go. This is what's going to replace our apple recipes on the show this year. Every time we have a challenge, we're going to have how do you prepare that meat. I don't know if this is the way it was prepared or anything, or if it just is a meat thing, or if it's a 71-year-old thing, but are you one of these people who's been predicting Joe as the medevac? I know you guys covered this a little bit last week about who's going to get medevaced. I feel like, I don't know if it was you or Alec or Kristen, but one of you was arguing that it was not going to be Joe. Was that you or somebody else?
I think we all agreed that it was going to be Joe, but Kristen was like, I just want it to be Ty, so he gets rid of that idol.
Which, I mean, the idol was gotten rid of because of this. We'll get into that later on. But, yeah, I know that with Noah every single week it's been, even before Joe was shown as injured, it was, well, Joe's old, he's going to be medevaced. And it turned out to be true. And the saddest thing is it really was, I think, just the age. I don't know if this would have happened to another person. It was such a weird situation, this whole challenge here, or not the challenge, the reward part of it. And first of all, I just want to throw out there, Jeff Probst, before we even talk about all the food and everything, we have the chicken, beef, cheesecake. He never lets us down with those things. Now cheesecake is one of his big things. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to jump into the medevac itself yet, but Rossi, have you ever had similar pains from overeating on any type of meat? Do you have a meat that has this effect on your body? Do you have anything that has this effect on you?
I'm not answering that question.
I'll answer the question. It's gluten for me. And I could actually empathize with some of Joe's pains that he was bringing up. So, yeah, I mean, if I went out there and I ate a loaf of bread, I mean, if I went out there and ate a couple of crackers, I would probably feel the way that Joe did. So I can understand his pain and everything. But it feels bad to say this. But I can't be the only one that found this medevac kind of funny. Am I, or am I just a really morbid person here?
It was interesting. It was kind of rough to get through. I still think it was probably even worse than Joe, the other Joe that was medevaced.
Which Joe?
Token Cheens.
Oh yeah.
That was like, what the hell, but weak. This was just like
this would
have been weak.
Talking about Token Cheens, this would have been like if Jerry was medevaced because he couldn't digest beans. That's basically what it was. Like
You're just complaining because Jerry was old.
This is what happens to old people when they eat hard to digest things. No, I mean, I feel really bad about this because I think the show handled it in a really respectful way. And I do feel like they knew the audience was going to be expecting the old guy to be the medevac, which is why we had the cut on his head, the cut on his hand, and all those things. I mean, not just Joe. In all fairness, I was the one pointing out earlier in this season that everybody was being given a setup and that they knew that it was going to, or Probst had already announced this is going to be a medevac season. So they were trying to tease, well, who is it going to be? Please tell me this was at least a little bit funny to you so I don't feel so bad.
I wasn't laughing. I smirked slightly, but also I thought it was pretty uncomfortable.
I'll just say I'm a bit of a morbid person. Anybody who's listened to 007, which you can listen to as well, James Bond podcast, knows that I find the greatest humor in people being on fire. This isn't something I'll get into, but I've watched 2 movies today where somebody was on fire and it wasn't supposed to be a funny moment and I burst out laughing. Maybe I found my other thing. People who are old and have trouble digesting beef makes me laugh, but it's just maybe it's the whole situation that we have medevacs of people who have fallen into fires. By the way, only time I didn't laugh was Mike scooping in the fire. I don't want anybody to get mad at me. Only time that wasn't funny. If we had seen it, maybe, I don't know. But I'll move on to that before I get in trouble. People who have cuts and infections and things like that and passing out and, Russell Swan and Caleb earlier this season. Those things all very dramatic. And now we have, in the season that has been promoted as more medevacs than we've ever seen, we have the first ever medevac from overeating. Like, it just sounds terrible. This is like, if he had been medevaced earlier in the season, I feel like it would be more acceptable. And this is no knock against Joe. As I said, I can understand his pain. But it feels like we had this medevac season, and this isn't a guy with a cut on his head even. It's a guy who ate too much. Anything to add on this, or am I just digging my own hole, finding some humor in this?
Move on.
Okay. For all our listeners out there, Toggy Ranger especially, for the finale, we will have a recipe that involves beef and apples. I promise you that. Let's talk about the Michelle and Ty thing here. We've given our opinions on Michelle. We've given our opinions on Ty's ever-swaying allegiance based on his emotional reactions to people. Going into the finale, I've given my opinions to anybody who's read the power rankings so far. Let's get your take on it, Rossi. What are the chances that Michelle and Ty could work together in the finale now?
I think it's pretty high. Just because of the setup we got at the end of... Well, not the end, but during the episode during last episode. Damn. Just because they were putting a thing of Aubrey versus Sydney, like very brief, very short, but then again, most of the episode was on Joe, so it's hard to take a lot of this into consideration. But I think that, like, Sydney and Aubrey may have a bit of an issue in terms of working together, because I think they both see each other as threats. So I feel like there is a good possibility that Michelle-Ty alliance could work out.
Well, let's talk about the Sydney thing at the same time. So, I mean, you already said the chances of them seeing each other as a threat. That was a big part of this episode, too. I thought there wasn't going to be much to talk about this episode, but I feel like this was almost the first part of the finale. And, maybe this could have just been an extended finale and a final 5 or whatever. What do you think is the scenario where Sydney and Aubrey can turn on each other?
Honestly, I don't. As long as I think the only time that it wouldn't work out, of them turning on each other is if Sydney were to win. No, if Aubrey were to win immunity, because
then,
I see. I can see Sydney going to Michelle because they've had a relationship so far, and working out things with the three of them to get rid of Aubrey. I think that's where the tension of their grouping works out, and the fact that I see Aubrey as the most viable target at this point, just because Sydney has had a better relationship with Michelle than anyone else.
Well, okay, so I'll give my opinion here now. I think that Michelle and Ty probably would try to work together, but I feel like the opportunity has kind of gone now. We're going into a Final Four, and yeah, we saw it in Worlds Apart where Mike forced a tie, but I don't see a lot of scenarios where somebody wants to force a tie. I mean, Cook Islands, Worlds Apart, has there been another finale where a Final Four, a tie was pushed? You're the stat guy. Do you know of any others?
What were the ones you brought up?
Cook Islands and Worlds Apart.
Panama.
Panama. Okay, so...
Suri and whoever else had the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so it's still very rare to push a tie in Final Four. Now, I think the difference between those seasons, and I've been kind of making the argument that this is an odd season where people are playing a really poor game. I actually think, not that people are playing a poor game, I feel like the editors have chosen to show us the negatives as well as the positives as just a way of surprising the audience. So I don't think that these are dumb players. This isn't like, and no knock against San Juan del Sur, but I think that's kind of the reputation that San Juan del Sur has, that it wasn't necessarily the biggest group of fans, not that you have to be a fan, but the biggest people, like students of the game, who would really get all the best strategies to play. It was novice players. I don't think that's the case here. I think that Aubrey and Sydney really know what they're doing. I feel like Michelle probably knows what she's doing. And the second part of that, of what could Aubrey and Sydney turn on each other, I feel like that only would have happened this past week when Joe was still there and there was a number to do it. Now going into a Final Four, maybe Ty would push a tie, no pun intended. Michelle might, but I don't think that she'd want to take that chance. I feel like she needs to make a real move at this point, and Sydney and Aubrey, I think, are too into the game and playing much tighter games where they will not want to risk anything. So I feel like what's going to happen is that Aubrey and Sydney will realize they have to work together at the Final Four. They're either going to choose Michelle, choose Ty. That's going to form your Final Three, and then whoever wins that chooses to take the other person. The chance of Aubrey and Sydney taking each other if they make it to the Final Three, I think, is almost non-existent now. I would like to see it, but I think that would be the ideal Final Two, but I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think that Aubrey and Sydney would know better than to try to force a tie at this point, because really that's the only way it's going to happen. I don't see Michelle and Ty convincing either Aubrey or Sydney, come on over to our side. You know, they are on speaking terms now, and I think that's the best we've seen of them. But any other debate on that?
I don't think it's going to be a tie.
So you think that Ty and Michelle would work together? They'd be able to form something and convince Aubrey or Sydney to come over?
I think it's either going to be... okay, for the first vote, I'm just going based on Final Four, like, solely this. I think it's going to be either... The only three viable possibilities I see are Ty, Aubrey, or Sydney as going home. I think it's either going to be Michelle ends up going with the two girls and Ty goes home, or she's going to get one of the other two, either Aubrey or Sydney, to vote off the other. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be Ty and the other two girls to vote off the other one.
I find it interesting to think if Ty and Michelle could work together, which one they would choose to go with. Would they choose Aubrey or would they choose Sydney? So from putting yourself into their heads, who do you think is the safer bet for Ty and Michelle to go against in the finals, Sydney or Aubrey?
Who do I think? Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Well, let's say you're either Ty or Michelle. Take your pick. I don't know which one you'd rather be.
Michelle.
Okay, you're Michelle, and you decide you want to work with Ty. Which one of the other two do you want to bring in, which also determines which one of the other two would you rather go up against in the end, Aubrey or Sydney?
Well, I think it would be a better decision for Michelle to want to pull in Aubrey, just because I feel like she may lose Ty if she were to not pull in Aubrey. I feel like it may be smarter for her to play it that way, to like think about who Ty has had workings with, and Ty's had a better relationship with Aubrey than Sydney. And I don't think it really matters, because if, I don't know if this has been mentioned, but everyone's saying that it's a final two. So I feel like if it is a final two, then it's smart for her to do that, so then they can get rid of Aubrey and Ty, and Michelle can go to the end.
So what's your opinion? Is this final two or is this Philippines?
What was Philippines?
Well, Philippines was, again, it was a final four for the finale, but it still ended up as a final three for the final tribal council.
Well, the thing is, everyone's saying that the preview said 3 tribal councils.
Oh, did it say that?
That's what I heard.
Okay. So yeah, then I guess we would have to have a final two. And again, I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like if it is Aubrey and Sydney, I feel like this is a finale where it's really up in the air and I don't know who's going to win. I feel like Worlds Apart almost was that, where there was that surprise, because let's be honest, most finales you know who has at least the advantage going in. I felt like in Worlds Apart, Carolyn probably had the advantage over Mike, but it ended up going the opposite way. This season, if it comes down to Aubrey and Sydney, I think this is what we've been waiting for, and it's a tight vote. It's maybe 1 vote separating for the winner. I don't think anybody going up against Michelle is going to lose. So if Michelle ends up in the final two, I think as soon as that tribal council starts, I know who's winning, and it's not Michelle. That's my opinion. You might have a different one, or we know you have a different one. And
definitely.
I think it's safe to say at this point that even if Ty has supporters on the jury, and even if Ty has played a good game, which I don't know if he has, but even if he did, it's safe to say at this point, as soon as Ty has to open his mouth and defend his actions, he's going to fall apart. That's what we've seen all season. So I don't think Ty wins this game. So I'm going to be disappointed if this doesn't come down to Aubrey and Sydney, because I feel like it's just going to be predictable if it doesn't.
I also feel like it's going to be really predictable if it does come down to Aubrey or Sydney. Not in terms of who's going to win,
but who the final two would end up as.
Those would be, we have been pegged as those the biggest characters since the merge.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like such a disappointment just to see like the biggest edits get to the end. Like, I would not want to watch a season where Russell Hantz was sitting against like an equally Russell Hantz character. Like, I wouldn't want to see that. I wouldn't want to see like 3 Boston Robs at the end. I want to mix.
Yeah. Well, I get that, but I think at the same time, what's great is that going into the merge, Noah is going to remind me of this, and even said he's going to loop it in our final episode. That's only going to happen if Noah's actually here, which he probably won't be. But I did say many times that there was no chance Aubrey was going to win this game, and I stood by that for several weeks. And it was really only 1 or 2 weeks into the merge where I turned around on that. And I think that's what makes this more interesting. Is if you look at the season as a whole, Aubrey and Sydney would be surprises. Post-merge, I agree with you, but pre-merge, I probably would have thought there was some hope for Sydney. I would have seen no hope for Aubrey, so I think that makes it a bit of a surprise. Okay.
Yeah, I have no comment, so.
All right, no comment. Let's move on here. I guess one other thing to talk about, and that's that Ty's idol's gone. So, did anybody actually successfully play an idol or an advantage this entire season? Stats man, give it to us.
I don't know. Was anything played pre-merge?
No, I don't think so.
Then nope, because Neil lost his.
Scott wasted his.
Scott was voted out with Jason's idol, and Ty couldn't use his because Joe was medevaced.
And his advantage was a waste.
Was the biggest flop of all the votes we've had this season.
Okay, so coming into this season, knowing that there could be this super idol, there was also this advantage, Do you feel like this was a waste of time, or did you enjoy it still?
I was glad to see that it was an actual option, that it wasn't just like this could happen, but no one's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that it was actually like almost super close to it happening. Like we almost saw it in use. So I liked it that it was actually close, but I mean, it was just a waste of time at the end of the day because it wasn't used. But it also gave us a great tribal council, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. I mean, you could look at it and say, well, Neil's was a waste of time. Ty's extra vote was a waste of time. But I think both of them, the difference is both of them gave us those good tribal councils, like you said. If Ty didn't have the extra vote, he never would have taken the gamble on Michelle, and we wouldn't have had any drama coming into the final 2 episodes. If there wasn't the possibility of the super idol, we wouldn't have had that incredible moment where Scott is like, use it, Ty, use it, and he just chooses not to, which is going to go down in history as one of the greatest moments in Survivor history. But so for the twist itself, it didn't work out, but I feel like this has changed what a twist can be, where sometimes not using it is almost more interesting, because I feel like if this had just worked out as a super idol, the season would have been predictable. I don't know if it would have been something fans would be happy with. I feel like overpowered idols usually rub people the wrong way. The fact that it didn't work out made this more interesting of a season. So I'm really happy they had it, because I don't know if this season would have been as good without it. Do you want to just read what you typed in the chat? No, okay. I will read it for you. We're back to reading Rossi's subtitles. Niels didn't waste much time. He found it and then he left the game. We didn't see much of the guy and not a lot of impressions surrounding the idol gameplay. And then he said no when I asked him if he wanted to read what he typed. Yeah, Rossi's back subtitling here. Let's move into the final set of questions. We do Oz Topsy ones. We do Ozlet Show ones. Let's just combine them all.
Can I do the famous 5?
We are going to do that. Yeah, we're both going to get our chance to answer that.
Yes.
So, let's start with the Ozlet Show. We really only have the one question. Winner and loser of the week based on not gameplay, anything other than just who do you think came out looking good this week? Who do you think came out not looking good?
Okay, I have 2 for looking good.
There's only 5 people, so that's the majority.
Number 1 is Michelle. I think she came out strong. Don't laugh.
I didn't mean to laugh. I saw somebody on fire, and I saw an old person doubled over in pain after eating beef. Just continue.
I think she came out strong. She said, all right, I'm going to fix the issues that I've had with Ty, and it worked in her favor. So I think she had a good week, even though much didn't happen. And the other winner of the week is the doctor that diagnosed Joe.
Why is that?
He had a very solid edit. I think he was playing the hero card very strong, but not in an over-the-top Rupert kind of style. So I think he played it well.
And I'm sure there was a subtitle at the end of the show saying that he is open to returning to play the game again. I thought I saw that. All right, so the doctor and Michelle. Not the answer I was expecting. Who's the loser of the week?
The loser of the week is the captain of the boat.
The captain of the boat?
Yes, the one that sends Joe home.
Okay. I don't remember a captain of the boat.
Just the driver of the boat. The boat driver.
The boat driver, okay.
Just because his edit was really bad this week, and I don't think he got many confessionals, so...
No, but then again, confessionals don't matter. Michelle has 45 of them. My turn. Winner of the week. I am going to go with Joe. We saw Joe this week. We haven't had that in a while. So good on you, Joe. You made our screens. And I'm just going to say, I love Joe when we do see him. I think he's a great character. Loser of the week, Jeff Probst bringing up the fact that his age is the reason for this. Oh, I hated it because I feel like them, even if it wasn't just with Jeff and Ten at the time, them airing that was almost them saying, hey, it's not really safe for us to put 70-year-olds on the show anymore. Because there was no point to saying, for him to come out and say, well, it's really actually ironic that it's your age that is the reason you're sick and not anything we did. Like, we understand the show's not at fault if somebody decides to gorge on beef, But the fact that they went out of their way to say, it's your age, Joe, it's your age, like, just stop passing the buck. I didn't like that. And I feel like that was just them telling us, you're never going to see a 7-year-old on the show again. Bring Joe back a second time. Just have him switch to chicken or something like that instead for his protein. 21 confessionals for Joe all around. Not bad. Beat some of the winners we've seen. And we've all been saying there's no way Joe's winning. Maybe he could have. Let's move on to the...
I think it's really funny that they're like, oh, it's your age. But I heard a rumor that they wanted Rudy back.
If Rudy came back, like...
I heard a rumor that they wanted him back. And then they're like, Joe's too old.
My
like,
mind
get out of here with your lies.
Blown. Just the idea of Rudy coming back just blew my mind. That would be amazing. And, you know, how old would Rudy be now? What would he be, 87?
Oh, I thought he was 90-something.
90? Well, he was, 72 when the show started. It's, 16 years old now, so 88, I guess.
I'm going to Google it for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, he's 88. He's
88. There you go. I was right on something. See, I'm the new fact guy here. 88 years old. I want to see an 88-year-old on Survivor. I don't want to see them overeating. I'm just developing a bad reputation for myself in that. But yes, let's get Rudy back on there. Oztopsy final questions. What are the Oztopsy final questions? Isn't it just exactly the same as the final 5 questions?
I don't know. I haven't been on an autopsy in like 20 years.
I haven't either. Our reboot worked out well, but this is a good substitute. Let's move on. The final 5 questions, the Kaoh 5 or whatever you call it. All right, Rossi, 1 episode away from the end. Who is your tip to win Survivor Kaoh?
Michelle.
Michelle. Okay. Do I want to ask for the reason why?
It's probably because of a lot of bias, but Michelle.
Okay. And yet your profile pick is still Alicia, not Michelle.
Oh, Alicia should have won. She was robbed.
Yeah. So who is your dark horse? We only have 4 people to base it on here. These answers are going to be pretty predictable, but who's your dark horse?
Joe.
All right.
He's not in the game still?
Yeah, he could still come back, I guess.
Okay, good.
So in other words, you're saying Michelle is a guaranteed lock to win?
Yeah, there's no dark horse.
All right. Who is the next to go?
Ty/Sydney.
Ty/Sydney. So Aubrey...
I think Aubrey and Michelle are safe.
Okay, so Aubrey is like your default dark horse behind Joe then.
No.
Well, she's the only one who hasn't come up for an answer, so she would have to be.
No.
Okay. There's a lot of thought put into these. We'll just let that be
Aubrey only has 50-something confessional. She's not going to win, Colin.
That's right. You have to be in the 44 to 46 range to be the winner of Survivor. If you were on Brains, Brawn, Beauty season, which tribe would you be on?
Man, I want to go back and listen to all the other recaps to hear all the terrible answers people have given.
I remember them all, I think.
I'm trying to think of all like the recappers that were on, like the survivors that are like, oh, I wouldn't be on that tribe, or is there like a normal tribe or something? Like,
most people answered one tribe. Surprisingly, it wasn't Brains. I think the majority of ours answered a different tribe.
It's the worst answer. I'm just going to go with Beauty.
You're not the first person to say that. Earlier this season, and I think we did the exact same questions in the first Brains, Brawn, Beauty, and I think most people just like to pretend that they're too humble, but they're actually just full of themselves. So like, I'd be on the Brains tribe. Ashley Trainer did say she would be on the Beauty tribe. You're in her company now.
Woo!
You two make up the Beauty tribe here.
Yes.
I will say I did answer when I was asked this earlier on that I would be on all 3 tribes. So I guess I'll be a substitute on your tribe as well.
Oh, can I be on the Brawn Beach when no one else is there tribe?
You're going to be the sole Brawn exile by yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
But lock in Beauty.
Are you an Alicia type of Brawn, or are you more of a Scott type of Brawn?
I'm no type of Brawn.
Okay.
I'm a Darnell type of Brawn.
Now, there is a bonus question, and we'll just keep it up. You get the bonus question as well. You weren't on a season of Survivor, though. So I guess you could have your choice of 2 answers here. The bonus question is you have to pick the ultimate brain, the ultimate brawn, and the ultimate beauty from your season. Now, you can choose to either pick it from this season, or you can choose it out of the group of Ozlets, which is your season.
Okay. So the ultimate brain, brawn, and beauty from the Ozlets.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh. I think Cable would be the brawn.
Okay. We won't
I
say
think he's-
why, but he is.
I think he's strong. I think he's probably one of the strongest.
Okay.
I think. Ooh, this is tough. I don't know everyone so well. I think you would be the ultimate brain.
I agree. I'm
And
the
I
pompous
think-
person I was just referring to. It's like, I'd be the brain.
And then I think I'd be the ultimate beauty.
Okay. So, we have the ultimate brain, brawn, and beauty here of the Ozlet show. I'm just going to say I make all three. That's my answer. But
Lame.
I appreciate the shout out from Ross here. And final question, which player on this season is playing the most like how you would play?
This is always the toughest question to answer. Just because, like, I don't know, honestly, it's hard to judge how I would do. But I'm going to go with two answers here. I'm going to go with, like, the opposite spectrums, like the good player and then the bad player, to, like, get a range of how I think I'd be. I think on the bad side, I could be like Jenny, in which I have really good ideas, but then I don't know how to do it, and it'll just flop on me.
And you'd freak out at Tribal?
Yeah, or I'd do something really crazy just to get people to trust me, but then it would alienate myself from the tribe and all that kind of stuff. And then I'd also think I'd like to be more like Sydney, who's got a good mix of all three attributes to win the game. So somewhere in the middle or on either of those spectrums.
Okay, I am going to answer this one too. I think I probably would play the most like... I would probably play the most like Sydney, but I'll give the answer like you, because I think on the positive side, I probably would play like Sydney. On the negative side, I would definitely... Darnell. Is that what you answered for me, Anna and Darnell?
Yeah, those are my guesses for you.
Okay, then I wasn't going to say Darnell for myself. I was going to say on the negative side, I probably would have played a little bit like Peter. But so I guess I'll just say, yeah, Sydney and Peter would be my answers. Not Julia. I would not play like Julia. Not play like Scott. Not play like Jason. He's still typing people. Alicia, Jenny. Jenny, maybe. I would play like Jenny, too. Liz, no. Debbie, yeah, I would be a total Debbie out there. Not just because I'm a part-time model, but I would be like Debbie, too. You run through the entire cast there. And I've got a baby crying right now in my arms. If anybody wants to hear, this is the newest listener to Survivor Oz.
Hello, Baby Hamilton.
His name is not Baby Hamilton. Listen to The Amazing Race. We should mention we will get Amazing Race out there. We'll give some plugs right now for other episodes as my baby is crying in my arms. This is the best way we've ever ended a show.
You would play most like your child.
Yeah, that's right. I would be squirming and crying and soiling my diaper during the final moments of the season. Let's just throw it out there. Amazing Race episodes coming soon. Finale, we will hopefully have a guest on. If not, Rossi, you're up again. Thanks for joining us here on Survivor Oz.
Oh, Baby Hamilton. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right. And
Thank you, Baby Hamilton, for gracing us with your presence.
yeah, baby Casper does say goodbye as well. And we will be back next week. And until then, thank you, Rossi. Thank you, Toggy Ranger. Be prepared for that beef episode. And this episode has made a baby cry. We will speak to you next time on The Train.